أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين. Verse number 33 of Surah Nisa. وَلِكُلٍّ جَعَلْنَا مَوَالِيَ مِمَّا تَرَكَ الْوَالِدَانِ وَالْأَقْرَبُونَ وَالَّذِينَ عَقَدَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ فَآتُوهُمْ نَصِيبَهُمْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ شَهِيدًا. For everyone we have appointed heirs to what the parents and near relatives leave, as well as those with whom you have made a compact. So give them their share of their heritage. Indeed, Allah is witness to all things. This is, in a sense, summarizing the discussions that we had about inheritance, saying that لَكُلًّا, for every group, that is for men and for women, for groups of men and for groups of women. This لَكُلًّا here, it has been translated as for everyone. It may have the meaning, this tanween at the end of لَكُلًّا may give the meaning of for everyone, but a better understanding is that لِكُلٍّ مِّنَ النِّسَاءِ وَالرِّجَالِ. This is what in Majma' al-Bayan At-Tabrasi has suggested, that this tanween in لِكُلٍّ returns to الرِّجَالُ وَالنِّسَاء. So for each group, for men and for women, we have appointed heirs. لِكُلٍّ جَعَلْنَا مَوَالِيَ مِمَّا تَرَكَ الْوَالِدَانِ وَالْأَقْرَبُونَ. And mawali is the plural of mawla. Here, of course, it means heirs, those who inherit, waratha. الَّذِينَ هُمْ أَوْلَى بِالْمِيرَاثِ, those who have priority over the inheritance, and they can get inheritance before others or in the exclusion of others. So mawali is the plural of mawla. Mawla is someone who's awla to do something, or awla to attain something. That means is more deserved to attain something or to do something. So mawali here, and we had in Surah Maryam as well, إني خفت الموالي من ورائي وكانت امرأتي عاقرة. There it is translated as cousins, mawali, not heirs, but those who are more deserved to look after the affairs of a person after the demise. Of course, Zachariah was afraid because his cousins who were in positions of religious authority were not very good people to take charge of the affairs of religious matters. So he asked for a فَهَبْ لِي مِن لَّدُنْكَ وَلِيًّا. Here wali means, of course, an heir who can look after these matters in that verse. So mawla is someone who's awla to something. For each group, for men and women, we have appointed mawali, those who are deserved to receive who receive inheritance. Mawaliya mimma taraka al-walidani wal-aqrabun, to what the parents and near relatives leave. Mimma taraka al-walidani wal-aqrabun. So mawla is awla. And also in Surah Al-Hadid we have a very interesting verse, very thought-provoking, about fire of the hell. فَالْيَوْمَ لَا يُؤْخَذُ مِنْهُمْ فِدْيَةٌ وَلَا مِنَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. This is addressed to the hypocrites. Today, no compensation will be taken from you, and not from the kuffar. مَأْوَاكُمُ النَّارِ, your abode is fire. Here مَوْلَاكُمْ. It means it's the most befitting place, or the most befitting situation in which you can be placed. Of course, some may say Mawla here means someone who looks after the affairs of someone else. And fire, actually, it is the fire who looks after your affairs today. Even if we say fire there is intelligent, it has intelligence, then that makes more sense. وَبِئْسَ الْمَصِيرُ. So anyone, Mawali are all those who were described in the verses which talked about inheritance, whether children, parents, brothers, mothers. Now, we can actually read this verse in two ways. One is, and depending on which way we read it, the meaning would change. وَلَكُلٍّ جَعَلْنَا مَوَالِيَ مِمَّا تَرَكَ الْوَالِدَانِ وَالْأَقْرَبُونَ. For every one of them, men and women, we have appointed heirs to what the parents and near relatives leave. And, of course, وَالَّذِينَ أَقَدَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ. For everyone, we have appointed heirs to what the parents and near relatives and those with whom you made a compact leave. So this وَالَّذِينَ أَقَدَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ is conjoined to وَالِدَانِ وَالْأَقْرَبُونَ. وَلَكُلٍّ جَعَلْنَا مَوَالِيَ مِمَّا تَرَكَ الْوَالِدَانِ وَالْأَقْرَبُونَ. So men and women from each group, there are those who receive inheritance. So it's not the case that some is deprived of inheritance and others take it. Men and women, both of them are mawali, heirs for what the parents and near relatives and those with whom you have made a compact. Aqadat aymanukum. You have made a pact. And from them also you inherit. They inherit from walidan, parents, from aqrabun, relatives, from those with whom you have made a pact. And those who read the verse in this manner say that وَالَّذِينَ أَقَدَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ means husbands and wives. Because there is a aqd between husband and wife, isn't it? There's a pact between husband and wife, and therefore وَالَّذِينَ أَقَدَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ refers to husbands and wife. This is if we recite it in this way. And ayman is the plural of yamin, because usually in old days people just touched each other's hands when they wanted to conclude a pact or a treaty or a business or something. So ayman is used as an allegory for a pact. وَالَّذِينَ for a pact, for a covenant. وَالَّذِينَ عَقَدَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ. And then فَآتُوهُمْ نَصِيبَهُمْ means you have to pay their shares of these mawali, these heirs, whether men and women. فَآتُوهُمْ نَصِيبَهُمْ. I just repeat this way of reading the verse and translate it. وَلِكُلٍّ for every group from among men and women, جَعَلْنَا مَوَالِيَ we have appointed heirs of what the parents, the relatives, and those with whom you have made a covenant leave. If they leave anything, both men and women inherit from them. So فَآتُوهُمْ نَصِيبَهُمْ give them their shares. This is one way of reading. However, most of the commentators haven't actually understood this in this way. If we read it in this way, then there's nothing complicated in the verse, and nothing that we may want to refer back to the history in understanding the verse. However, we may, most of the commentators have read it in this way. وَلَكُلٍّ جَعَلْنَا مَوَالِيَ مِمَّا تَرَكَ الْوَالِدَانِ وَالْأَقْرَبُونَ end. Full stop. وَالَّذِينَ أَقَدَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ فَآتُوهُمْ نَصِيبَهُمْ. And those with whom you have made a covenant pay their shares. So the inheritance of the heirs of parents and children are dealt with. Then we are now talking about a new group. وَالَّذِينَ عَقَدَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ. The first reading which I mentioned is something that Al-Jubba'i and some other commentators have chosen, and Allama Tabatabai rahmatullah alayh has chosen that reading as well. But this reading, that we begin a sentence, a new sentence for وَالَّذِينَ عَقَدَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ, is the reading of the majority of the commentators. In fact, this is cut off from the previous expression and makes a new statement. So who are الَّذِينَ عَقَدَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ? Again, here we can say that الَّذِينَ عَقَدَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ means wives and husbands. But apparently this is not referring to them. They are dealt with previously. What is meant by وَالَّذِينَ عَقَدَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ is either the khulafa, those who had an alliance, an oath of alliance with each other. For example, two people at the time of Jahiliyyah, before Islam, they would say that let's make a covenant with each other that brings about certain responsibilities and certain advantages. Here I have actually mentioned the expression that they usually used. They said to each other, Dami damuk, wa harbi harbuk, wa salmi salmuk, wa tarithuni wa arithuk. My blood is your blood. Those who fight me are your enemies. Those who are at peace with me are your friends. And you inherit from me, I inherit from you. And وَتَعَقَلُ عَنِّي وَأَعْقَلُ عَنْكَ. If something happens, for example, unintentionally, I killed someone, then you pay the compensation, and vice versa, I pay the compensation. That's why it was called Zamanul Jarira. That's to guarantee the compensation of the crime. And of course, it was much more complicated than that. Now, what we are concerned about is this earth, that tarithuni wa arithuk. You inherit me, I inherit you. And this was a covenant, a pact, and therefore, وَالَّذِينَ عَقَدَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ, those with whom your right hands have made a covenant, so to speak, pay them their shares. Now, some say that, well, this was something which belonged to Jahiliyyah. And how much they inherited? They say they inherited 1/6, 1 out of 6 shares of the heritage of the deceased. Now, most of the commentators say that this is abrogated. This practice is abrogated by the verse in Surah Al-Ahzab, وَأُولُو الْأَرْحَامِ بَعْضُهُمْ أَوْلَى بِبَعْضٍ. The relatives have more priority over others. So while the relatives are there, the share would not go to anyone else. However, this may not be abrogated, because 1/6 is less than 1/3 of the heritage, and therefore, if there was such a covenant, naturally, out of 1/3, this 1/6 could have been paid, and the verse is emphasizing it. But of course, there's something which I will mention later on. And some commentators like Mujahid have said that فَآتُوهُمْ نَصِيبَهُم means in other matters, like helping, paying compensation, and other issues which were actually included in this pact, but not inheritance, because that one has been abrogated. But the verse is not abrogated, because آتُوهُمْ نَصِيبَهُم means آتُوهُمْ نَصِيبَهُم from other things. Give them their shares from other things. Well, this is one meaning, but even if we say that this was about inheritance, 1/6, it doesn't actually, we don't need to say that the verse is abrogated, because 1/6 could have been given out of 1/3. The other, we can say, occasion of the revelation or interpretation of the verse is that this is about those with whom the Prophet, peace be upon him, made a pact of brotherhood when they entered in Medina. When the migrants entered Medina and the Prophet made this pact of brotherhood, then one of the articles of that pact was that they inherit from each other. And whether that was abrogated or not, again, some say that it was abrogated by the verse وَأُولُو الْأَرْحَامِ بَعْضُهُمْ أَوْلَىٰ بِبَعْضٍ فِي كِتَابِ اللَّهِ. Now, there's one interesting thing here, and that is, after revelation of this verse, was it permissible for people to still make this pact of Zamanul Jarira and inherit from each other after the verse وَأُولُو الْأَرْحَامِ بَعْضُهُمْ أَوْلَىٰ بِبَعْضٍ فِي كِتَابِ اللَّهِ. One may say that a pact made before Islam must have been respected and honored, and Islam never wanted to actually ex post facto say that these have no consequences anymore. But after the revelation of this verse, وَالَّذِينَ أَغَدَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ فَآتُوهُمْ نَصِيبَهُم, especially after وَأُولُو الْأَرْحَامِ بَعْضُهُمْ أَوْلَىٰ بِبَعْضٍ فِي كِتَابِ اللَّهِ, then there shouldn't have been such a pact among Muslims. So to make a compromise between the views of the commentators, we may say that, yes, وَالَّذِينَ أَغَدَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ فَآتُوهُمْ نَصِيبَهُم, give them their share of inheritance, but from this day onwards, أُولُو الْأَرْحَامِ بَعْضُهُمْ أَوْلَىٰ بِبَعْضٍ فِي كِتَابِ اللَّهِ. So you have honored your pact, you have honored your covenant, which has been made in the past, and in this, by the same token, you have discarded this type of pact in future. In fact, we have a hadith from the Prophet that when he conquered Mecca, he delivered a sermon where he said, مَا كَانَ مِنْ حَلْفٍ فِي الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ فَتَمَسَّكُوا بِهِ فَإِنَّهُ لَمْ يَزِدْهُ الْإِسْلَامُ إِلَّا شِدَّةً وَلَا تُحْدِثُوا حَلْفًا فِي الْإِسْلَامِ. Any covenant that existed prior to Islam, you must maintain it, for Islam only adds more emphasis to it. However, do not initiate new covenants based on pre-Islamic customs. So, honoring an ahad, honoring an oath or a promise or a pact, is something that Islam has reinforced. You remember at the beginning of Surah Al-Bara'ah, Surah Tawbah, there is an announcement that from today, we are not going to make any covenant, any pact, any treaty with mushrikun. and those with whom we are at war, we are at war. And we give you 4 months. These are al-ashhur al-hurum. أشهر الحرم فإذا انسلخ الأشهر الحرم فاقتلوا المشركين حيث وجدتموهم. We are at war. The covenants that we have made have come to end, and you are not making any new covenant because you have broken many of them, because you are conspiring against the community of Muslims. So either you accept Islam and come into our fold, or you leave, otherwise we will fight you. However, the verse emphasizes those إلا الذين عاهدتم عند المسجد الحرام, except those with whom you made a covenant by Masjid al-Haram. They did not break it. They did not do anything violating the articles of that treaty. فَأَتِمُّوا أَحْدَهُمْ إِلَى مُدَّتِهِمْ. You have to honor that treaty, that pact and covenant until the end. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُتَّقِينَ. This is taqwa. Whether it's with a mushrik, with a Muslim, with anyone, ahd, covenant, must be honored and respected. So what about these covenants which went against Islamic laws with regards to inheritance? Now, the verse says, وَالَّذِينَ عَقَدَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ فَأَعْطُوهُمْ نَصِيبًا. This is about the past. But now that the new ruling has been revealed, you should not make any such covenants anymore. So here we have to make a fine distinction between approving and not rejecting. Islam does not reject any treaty, any covenant which was made before, but would not approve that those types of covenants should be initiated after the revelation of these verses. So there's a fine distinction between approving and not rejecting. And this narration, مَا كَانَ مِنْ حَلْفٍ فِي الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ فَتَمَسَّكُوا بِهِ, and then he said, وَلَا تُحْدِثُوا حَلْفًا فِي الْإِسْلَامِ. You honor what is past, but do not initiate new covenants like that. In a sense, it says that Islam does not approve of it, but since that has been in effect, so it doesn't have these new rulings, doesn't have ex post facto effect. Very beautiful, very beautiful. And so there's no need to say that this is abrogated or anything like that. It's talking about the past covenants which were made. Now here the issue is that in the previous verses, what we saw were the rulings regarding inheritance. There was no mention of those with whom people made a half, a covenant of support, for example. We may call it covenant of support. Okay, there's no mention of that. So they came the question, what about those people with whom we made the pact and we actually agreed to give shares from our inheritance? It says, وَالَّذِينَ عَقَدَتْ أَيْمَانُهُمْ فَآتُوهُمْ نَصِيبًا. For those you give them. So there's nothing here to talk about abrogation actually. It's talking about an event which is past, but the consequences have remained. So this was a provisional accommodation during this period of transition. I think this is the best interpretation that we can give. So we may say that the verse should be read like this, that وَلَكُلٍّ جَعَلْنَا مَوَالِيَ مِمَّا تَرَكَ الْوَالِدَانُ وَالْأَقْرَبُونَ. Full stop. For everyone we have appointed heirs to what the parents and near relatives leave. Now, what about those covenants, وَالَّذِينَ عَقَدَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ فَآتُوهُمْ نَصِيبَهُم, as well, and those with whom you have made a compact, a covenant, give them their shares, but do not initiate any new half, any new covenant. إِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ شَهِيدًا. Allah is witness over everything. Now here, it may mean that do not betray in these rights, do not betray the heirs, do not betray women because they are women, and all other things that went into the mind of people. Do not take all the property for yourself. And also with regards to the pacts you made, God was a witness over that. ما تكون من نجوى ثلاثة إلا هو رابعهم ولا خمسة إلا هو سادسهم. No two people whisper unless Allah is the third of them, and no four unless Allah is the fifth of them. So this is something that you have to bear in mind when you want to distribute the shares of people in their inheritance rights. Okay, that is about this verse. There's one other thing, one other hadith, which I was hesitating whether I should mention it here or not. Hadith is from Imam Raza alayhi salam, but it's good to go into, delve into discussing such narrations which are not few in number. We have numerous narrations in this line in the course of such verses. Once Imam Reza alayhi salam was asked about those with whom you have made a covenant, وَالَّذِينَ عَقَدَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ فَآتُوهُمْ نَصِيبَهُمْ. He said what is meant here is the imams. God has tied your covenants with them. So here we are coming out of the context, of the verse, and applying a sentence of the verse to some other instances which are not in the context. This is what we call ta'wil. And of course, ta'wil is something that only Imam can do. Ta'wil is not something that everyone can do. It's the application of a verse in the instances which are more far-fetched but needs deeper thought, deeper deliberation to understand. Certainly, وَالَّذِينَ أَغَدَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ, when we made a covenant with the Prophet, peace be upon him, to be a Muslim, we accepted whatever the Prophet said. I'm just explaining the hadith in a sense. We accepted whatever the Prophet said, and one of the things that we believe that Prophet commanded was that man kuntu mawla fahada aliyun mawla, and that you have to follow a'imma after me, and that I have left two precious things, two weighty things after myself, kitab Allah wa itrati. I have left these two, and that means we have made a covenant with the Prophet and with the Imam about this issue. And the verse, taking it out of the context, we may say that yes, there's a deep meaning in that, or there's an allusion in the verse that as we pay the nasib, the share of those with whom we have made a covenant of support, we have made a covenant of following, a covenant that they should lead us so that we go to paradise in return. And we have to keep this covenant. وَالَّذِينَ عَقَدَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ فَآتُوهُمْ نَصِيبَهُمْ. And then that inna Allah kana ala kulli shay'in shahida goes very well with this application. Allah is certainly the witness about what you do with the imams, what you do with this covenant that you have made with the imam. Okay, the verse number 34, the controversial verse of Surah An-Nisa, Al-Rajal Qawwamuna Al-Nisa, which inshallah we will discuss in our next session. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين.